Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just in Time Cafe. I'm Elizabeth Swan, co-founder of the Just in Time Cafe. I will be your moderator today. And if you've never been to the cafe before, you are in for a treat. I'm very excited about today's webinar, Zero In on Improvement Opportunities with Heat Maps, presented by Olga Zhuravel. And let me tell you a little bit about Olga. Olga leads the operational and process excellence in HR at Snowflake. Snowflake's a data cloud software company. She enables organizations to scale by helping teams make data-driven process-related decisions. She's been working in international HR for 15 years, focusing on recruitment, training administration, process optimization, development and implementation, system implementation, and data protection. She does a lot. She's a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, a certified coach for performance, CIPD accredited in employment law and employee relations, and she's been a Lean Six Sigma practitioner since 2011. Welcome, Olga.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. Very excited to be here today.
So great to have you. Just a few housekeeping notes for everybody before we get rolling. You can ask questions anytime by entering them into the chat area. There's also a question and answer area, and I'll look there in case you use that instead. But we'll be using the chat as much as we can throughout the session. Video of the session will be available for free on the Just in Time Cafe website. We usually post those Monday of the following week. Please join us for our first activity by sharing where you're from, as you are doing right now. You guys have registered from all over the world, and we're always a little curious about how international we are or how spread around the country we are. I'm all the way on the East Coast. Olga's all the way on the West Coast. And then there's everybody in between. So if you have not already, please type in the chat section where you're joining us from today. And I have seen a lot of familiar faces and some brand new ones, because we've got Shane and Stephen and Roberto and Amy, and let's see, we've got Mary in San Diego, Tiffany's in the Bay Area, we've got Aaron in Seattle, Emily from South Dakota, woohoo, you might be the only rep from South Dakota, way to represent. Aaron in New Mexico, Linda Grand Rapids, whoa, Maria Sanchez, you busted us out of the country from Ireland. Oh, Irina, Berlin, Germany. This is fabulous. Kate Simmons outside of Boston in my neck of the woods. Maria, Limerick Island. Awesome. A good day to you, or a good evening to you. Chicago, Mary Kay, hello. We've got Liana in Niagara Falls. We've got Gary in Cleveland, Angela in California, Lottie in Granite Bay. Whoa, Michelle, Imelda, Nashville, awesome. Oh, we got someone else from South Dakota, right? Okay, I might have Saskatchewan. Hola. Okay, Regina. Hola from Regina, South Dakota. Welcome, everybody. It is so awesome to see you. And since you registered for this webinar, if you haven't already registered one of our webinars, you are now on our mailing list. So you're going to get news about upcoming events, webinars. So let me tell you about the next webinar coming up. And that one is with Carlos Vallejo. He's Process Improvement Manager for Costco Wholesale Industries. He and his team are going to do a whole presentation on idea boards for Costco's optical lab. They've had amazing success. They have reduced optical breakage from 10 to 2%, saved over $30 million, and completely increased the engagement for lean improvement across the company. So I invite you to register for that. I'm going to put the link in here so you guys can register ahead of time if you want. And the other thing I want to tell you about was our current podcast, and that is with Kimberly Humphrey, who is the president of AME. That is the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. If you don't know about them, the name is a little bit misleading. Their biggest growing membership right now is healthcare. And they put on the most amazing conferences in my experience. I've been to a lot of different improvement conferences. Theirs have been the most impressive. Just great for best practices, amazing speakers. And since they'll have their first one live in October since the pandemic. So very big. She's amazing. She's doing an incredible job leading the AME. And with that, I would like to hand the reins back over to Olga to talk to us about heat maps. I'm psyched for this, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. Great geography. Good to see so many people today who want to hear more about prioritization and what exactly I'm going to talk today about. There are several things. First, we'll talk about what the problem with prioritizing is. Is there a problem? And that's one of the questions I'm going to ask and direct it to you too. Then we'll think what could make the difference when we're talking about prioritization. What would make it stand out when you're talking about things and trying to put them in perspective? Then I'll finally open on the objective of today's conversation, the heat maps. Why heat maps? What are they? Why are they important? And finally, how can they help you to up your prioritization game? The questionnaire, which for now is a little bit of a mystery, but I'm going to be covering a little bit more about that and why it's critical for the heat map success. And of course, I want to cover a little bit more of the groundwork or where you could start if this is the tool that you would like to consider for your organization, or maybe even for your personal life, because it can be as helpful there too. So to start, my question to you, and please feel free to enter any comments in the chat box. What is prioritization? Why do we need it? What is happening with it?
So feel free to enter your thoughts around prioritization, why we need it, into the chat area. Olga, Todd has input keeping things in order so we don't forget. Erin has added what to focus on first. What to focus on first with limited time, resources, and her quote is, "What's on fire?"
Right, I like that one.
Like that. Audrey, deciding what is most important to focus on now. Shane, determining what to do in what order. Gary, impact versus effort. Linda, managing time and resources. Lottie helps us focus. Stephen, we can't improve everything at the same time. Quite true. Managing time and resources from Maria. Work on things in order of importance, Mary. Jessica, focus our efforts on valuable resources. Scott, get the right things done. How's that?
Wonderful. That's a lot. And I'm glad to hear about that. And one of the reasons why we're talking about prioritization, especially now, this time of the year, is it's this time of the year when you finally start looking back at what we have accomplished during this year, what goals have been achieved so far, what's left out for the rest of the year. And I know that in many organizations, that's about time when you start, and someone said it in the chat box, when you start budgeting, when you start thinking about next year's priorities, what's important, and what kind of resources are we going to use and to need to accomplish our next year's objective. So it's pretty much all that you've said. And the thing is that the word priority came into the English language many, many years ago. And for 500 years, it used to be singular and stayed singular. Right now, we're saying right and left, this priority, that priority, this priority is over that priority. And then I hear a lot, and I'm sure you can sympathize with this one, priority 0, and even -1, meaning we hoped it would have been done by now, but if not, can you do it in the next hour? Priority tells us the relative importance of things. So why it became important? For a while, it was a singular. My singular priority for today is to lead this webinar for you. I wish it is at the top of my list, but there are so many other things that I need to keep on track. I need to have my to-do list. I need to understand what the consequences are of doing or not doing certain things. Same applies to the job too. So why we need it? We'll need it to know exactly how quickly we need to respond and address it, how long that effort might take, and how much resources potentially we might need for this one. So priority, in essence, signals impact and urgency. So what the problem could be, right? We all know what prioritization is, and you're well aware of that as you've just shared in the chat box. But what is the problem with prioritization? Why can't we have it straight? And this is my other opening question for you. In your experience, last year, last month, last week, a couple of hours before this webinar, what problems have you noticed with prioritization? Can you please chat your thoughts in the chat box?
Todd is saying everything's a priority. Mary is saying they change frequently. From Erin, squeakiest wheel keeps changing. Quote unquote, priority is too fluid, says Erin. Amy says it shifts after it's set. Emily says everyone has different priorities, me versus my boss. Marnie says misalignment. Linda says don't have the right information or know how long it will take. Arena says changing environment. Audrey says time. Hi, Audrey. Jennifer says siloed priorities. Very nice. There are many factors that can make something a priority, from Stephen. Mary Kay, whose priorities? Excellent question. Shane, who determines the prioritization again? And then Angela, the point of recognition differs from team to team, and a priority for one group is not a priority for another. Disconnect is where most value is added. Scott says these are all such good responses. Thank you, Scott. I agree. Jessica says not everyone agrees on the same set of priorities. Okay, back to you.
Totally agree with Scott. All of those are absolutely great answers, and I'm pretty sure I'll be adding to my list after this webinar. So thank you all for being so active in responding to this question. So some of the things, the basics one, not dedicating time to prioritization. Have you ever been a part of the team or group where you just roll with it? The fire comes up in the morning, you have to put all your resources out there, so this becomes a priority. In the next hour, something else happens, there's another priority, there's a customer on the phone, now this is a priority, and at the end of the day, you just count your losses during the day. So just not setting the time to prioritization. Another one is trying to solve too many problems at once. Oh yeah, this is a priority, but let's throw one more item over there, and this one, maybe it can encompass over that one. I know we're solving for this group of customers, but if we just throw one additional feature, one additional item to our product, maybe it can solve for a broader audience, or maybe not. But trying to solve everything at once, it normally stalls the process. This is what we face a lot in experience, and addressing problems that don't have the greatest value. And someone said it really nicely in the chat box: when the squeakiest wheel gets the oil. It's type of the meeting when you have 10 people sitting around the table virtually, and throughout the whole meeting, you hear 2 or 3 voices. And it's no surprise that most resources and time go into solving the problems for those who voice their opinions. Another one is failing to consider the big picture, and it becomes increasingly important as macroeconomic picture changes, as situation changes not only internally in the company, in the team, in the group, but also the big picture changes. And sometimes we're so set upon already our preset objectives and the plan to go, we fail to reevaluate, see that things have changed, the situation have changed, people have changed, and we need to reiterate and do something differently. Another one is getting distracted by the little things. And this one happens when you're too close to the process, when it's so close to your heart, you know it so well that you cannot really elevate above it and see what happening, you know, in a broader scope. The next one would be not linking to business goals. And this is something that is often omitted or forgotten. Why this is happening, in most cases, not intentionally. It's because we are, again, so much into the daily minutiae of what is happening in the team, in the group, in the function, that we forget about the big company objectives. Why else it's happening is because most priorities or goals, they are put together for like 1 year period, 3-year period. And quite often it's easy to forget about the long-term company objectives. This is what is happening here. And then prioritizing, utilizing a single criteria. So let's say we want to focus on our customer. Okay, let's see only what customer group A is needed, like what customers are looking into, what we are not looking into when we're looking at something else. We're not looking into the cost. We're not looking into the quality. We're just looking into the wants. Or if we're looking just into the cost, then we're not looking into something that could potentially impact the quality of the product, for example, or customer experience. So prioritizing using a single criteria is one of my favorite pet peeves during the prioritization talks, because we quite often forget how much goes into a single thing, and also how many teams work together to bring something live, be it a product or a service. So prioritizing using a single criteria might be hurtful in that way. I'll pause here for a second. Do you have any questions so far? What we're talking today about and why it's important?
I'm checking chat, seeing if anybody's got questions so far. I think Shane might speak for the group, saying we are tracking with you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shane. I appreciate the energy in the group. I can feel it even virtually, believe it or not. Okay, so when we are making the decisions, what makes a difference? When you're sitting in a room and you are the decision maker, how do you decide where to put the effort and energy and resources, time, money, you name it? And there may be some answers you have consciously that you could have written here in the chat box if you wanted to. But there is the subconscious, and subconscious always looks for stories. So the most powerful tool by far in today's world is storytelling. Just think about the bedtime when you put your youngest to sleep. They will never say, Mom, what was that graph you were telling me today about? Or, how many Zoom meetings you were in? No, they will tell me a story. Tell me a story about it. But stories, the most powerful stories, they never come just along. They normally come with images we illustrate them with. How do we do this? So let's imagine we're somewhere in, first half of 20th century, and there is weather forecast on the first ever black and white TV screens. And you would see something like that. Well, is it informative? Probably yes. Would it be enough for you to deduce where to take your family for a vacation, depending on the best weather available, if you just had one glance at it, because it rarely stays longer than that on the screen? Probably not. So there is something to help you nowadays. And this is just simple as that. You see some different colors showing you exactly how temperature moves and where you would see it already in the hundreds or in lower 60s. And for our international friends on the call, these are Fahrenheit, of course. So the difference between those two is obviously that whenever you see a pop of color, it becomes immediately more visually appealing and quicker to understand. And why exactly we need heat maps for our work life, and what is happening there? How do we do this? Why do we need to add some color to the important work about our process and improvement? Well, first off, give a strategic overview, right? You need someone to throw just one glance at what you want to present and already have a general idea of what is happening. When you are not feeling well and you are taking those thermometers, and I've seen those very cool new thermometers, you just put it to your head and then you push the button. And before you see the number, you see the color. It can be red. If you already have the high fever, it can be yellow, like, you're not there yet, and it can be green, everything is all right. Think about the traffic lights: green, go; yellow, wait, it's almost another one; and then red, you need to stop. So it gives you a strategic overview of what is happening. It allows you to compare using the same scale, because quite often in those prioritization conversations, what is happening is that you're comparing apples to oranges. Some department would state their priority and say it hurts because of that. And then another department would say, no, ours hurts because of that. And how can you compare on a company scale? Because the problems that product is solving is different than marketing is solving, different than legal is solving, or talk about compliance. And it helps you to orient faster, to have a quick glance at where exactly our attention is needed most. And it's just that. So the heat map, the long promised one that you've been waiting for. Well, first off, what is it? You see some colors, you see some words, you see some numbers here. I have decided to make a bit of fun with this one. So when I was thinking about the presentable heat map that I could share, I put the things here that most of us face on a daily basis. Some of the processes here that you see are grouped by what part of the day or what group of activities they bring together. So for example, morning routine: coffee making, dressing up, exercising, or meals that would be, a separate planning process: shopping, preparing, and storing. Okay, so those are our processes, and you could put yours here, right? Deliver the product to the customer, or onboarding, offboarding, testing of the new software. So your process is here, but what are those colors and those numbers, and how exactly they are helping people to make more efficient decisions on prioritizing? So let's start with the questionnaire. So to arrive at colors and numbers and something comparable for the processes, you have to start with the basics. You always need to start with the basics. You need to know the basic information about your process. The category. So in my example here, the category would be morning routine, or meals, or work the organization. The population impacted. If you're talking about organization, you can have something that impacts one person, 5 people, or 500 people. Frequency, how often you do this. You would probably need to know who are your subject matter experts or key stakeholders. And then we come at process assessment per se, which can be split in 5 categories for us, but for your specific organization or function needs, you might see some others. And I will give you a helpful tool where you can play what you can play with, and you can add your own additional items here. What I'm looking at currently is process maturity, process documentation, automation level, customer experience, and fulfiller experience. So those are going to be the categories that we do compare and make sure that we have that single score and that color on a heat map. So what is happening here with the questionnaire? First of all, as I already shared here, you put here a service or a group of services. And here's an example from what I've just shared with you. Let's take the morning routine, the first line. morning routine and the process is a coffee making, and I put a definition here, a process is a sequence of steps taken to achieve a particular outcome. Then you have the process maturity, process documentation, automation level, experience for the customer, and experience for the fulfiller. What are those optimized, ad hoc, standardized, and other line items here? So I will cover that in a moment here. I will give you the definitions of what it means and how we arrived at that. Same with process documentation. Automation level is as simple as that. It's just how much human effort is needed to perform this process, or otherwise how much automation already exists there, what is happening with the current process. And as I like to think about it, let's look at your process, any process, as a timeline. Let's say, for simplicity, it takes you 10 minutes to complete the process. So out of those 10 minutes, 9 minutes are automated, and you only need to do something for 1 minute. That would put it in somewhere around, like, digitized. There is up to 95% is automated, and only like 5 to 14% is manual. Then you would look similarly to each and every one of them down there below. With a customer or fulfiller experience, why it's important to look at both is that quite often, I've seen in my experience too, is that we are striving and doing our best to give this perfect white glove service for our customer, all the same forgetting about the experience of the fulfillers, and then organizations complaining about people leaving, people looking outside, and what is happening. So in our understanding, it's equally important to look at the customer experience and fulfiller experience, and which is more, because by this time you probably already have guessed that there are some numbers behind. We see them as equally important when we're talking about experience for this specific exercise. So what else is here? For each and every of those categories and answers, we have particular scores. So first of all, those are the criteria. I've shared them with you just a while ago. The process maturity, the process documentation, process automation, experience for customer, and experience for fulfiller. What are those numbers, you would wonder? Those are the weights. So whenever you are looking at the numbers on a heat map, those are the exact numbers that come out of the calculations when you're looking at your criteria and the values for the below drop-down lists, and multiplied by the weight for each specific group. So in this case, we have assigned 30% of the weight of the whole score to process maturity, 20% to process documentation, 25% to process automation, and 12.5 each for experience for customer and fulfiller. I will pause here before we go further. Any questions? Anything you wanted to ask me here?
I will check the chat, see if any folks have questions. Yeah, a lot of detail, a lot of definitions. A lot of really helpful background. So Erin's asking, do the weights have to add up to 1?
The weights, yes, they do.
Yeah. Yes, they do, Erin. And she's thanking you.
Thanks for the question, Erin.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Okay.
those add up to 1, everything else.
Okay.
Keep going.
So here, for the purpose of this webinar, I also put together a slide on the definitions. I won't be spending time probably on each and every those line items to read through, but I will definitely have this deck available after the webinar, just giving this to you to have better understanding of what we put there, what definitions we put there, and what work goes behind the scenes in this process improvement prioritization tool. So for each and every of those categories, you will need to come up with definitions. You can obviously use mine that you are seeing today, but if you're into this, you might want to add or subtract some of the values from the drop-down list and add your own. Let's say one of the examples of process documentation, and why it's important is because you can not talk about any kind of further improvement or say automation if you don't have any documentation available. Like, what are you going to automate? And quite often I see this happening throughout my more than 15 years of experience, that we're just diving head first into the automation, and you hear that a lot. But it's not secret that in the long term, more than 70% of companies fail their digital transformation efforts because they fail to look into what exactly is going into this automation and what comes out of it, and whether the process has really improved or not. So this is one of the really important ones, and that's why you are seeing this in the process prioritization tool. So the insufficient one would cover the little documentation, can be also outdated or have significant gaps. Sufficient is just enough high-level documentation for general process understanding or audit. And comprehensive would cover all required information about the process that can be found, like policies, process maps, frequently asked questions, and so on. Automation is by percentage. Again, for your personal use, you may want to change it, use less values or more if you want to differentiate it further. And experience, pretty much satisfactory, good, excellent, or not available. Here, a little disclaimer: quite often customer experience is not available, and we try not to rely on the single anecdotes like information. Like, let's say you had 500 people going through a specific process or buying a product, and 2 of them reached out saying that they are extremely unhappy with customer service. It would be unfair to put here that the experience is unsatisfactory because it's only 2 out of 500, which does not make it statistically valuable to put it here. So we would rather put it not available right now and see into those measures than not to put anything. If you put not available here, then all the weight goes into the fulfiller experience, to the only experience that we have, Okay. Putting them here just for a second for you to familiarize yourself with that. Do you have any questions here on the definitions?
Let's see how they're doing. Angela's asking, who would propose the weights of each category?
Angela, I love this question. And there is not a simple answer to that one, unfortunately. Or fortunately, it's a trial and redo game. And pretty much what we did the very first time, we just, there was a small group that was brainstorming, and we're like, okay, so what would we do? All those 3, 4, 5 people in the room, what do we think is important? And we try, but then we take several processes from various functions, and we try to assess them, to get the score, to get the color, put them on the heat map. And while looking at this heat map with those scores, with those, with this already big picture, we're trying to understand whether it represents the reality. So if we're saying that one of the processes is green on a heat map and with a high score, but we know for a fact that it's problematic, that it has some issues to that, something must have been wrong. Maybe we don't have enough values just to differentiate enough. Maybe we didn't distribute the weight correctly. Maybe we didn't use enough differentiators or even enough criteria. So we are going back and reevaluating. So the first several times, what I would suggest happening is that you're taking your most helpful ally from the team you will be working with. You take a little group of processes with this specific person who is supportive of this initiative. And you are going through this exercise once, twice, 3 times before you roll out into the bigger group. Angela, is this answering your question?
And I think Erin asked a question that you also just answered, which is, would a group convene to decide on weights and definitions? So you just described what you did in terms of groups. Angela's saying, yeah, you answered it. My question is, once you did the weights, have you pretty much stuck with the weights you've got for everything? I mean, I guess it's for your organization. You just stuck with those weights for a while.
Yes, that's important for consistency. And that ensures that we are comparing apples to apples to my previous point. And sometimes it may cause friction in the conversations. Like, my department takes care of the customers and you are just in the back end. How can we compare the two? And this is not the tool that will make decisions for you. But this is a tool that can highlight what is happening and be a good conversational point. Yeah. So when you pull it all out there, and in our most recent one, we had more than 150. Can you imagine? It doesn't even fit on the one PowerPoint slide. So it do it by function. But that helps because you start the conversation. The whole point of any tool, any visual, you're telling the story. But when every person individually tells a story, the challenge is that some people are more eloquent. For some people, they use the language, it's their first one, and they are so comfortable, they're extroverted, they represent the function that knows most, and their story looks different. And then others would bring the same value. They would make the same point, but they have a different personality. They work in a different function. They have other, they may have personal challenges they're working through. So why it's helpful is that once you see it all, it's an invitation for everyone to chime in, so that shy person in the back of the room with the very red processes and low scores can finally have a valid spot in the conversation, can finally have a voice, if you wish, and then this can be talked through. So yes, it is helpful to have an additional metric, especially for some of the processes where metrics are in their very in the very beginning, and you don't have much to go on off of when you don't measure much. It helps to put that first stake in the ground and start with something that will be universal and helping compare over the same scale.
That's great description, Olga, of the process you went through to get to the weights. And it sounds like both a combination of you experimented and that experimentation helped you reach agreement, which is really nice.
All right. Oh, let's move on. I like the conversation here. It's awesome. Great questions. Thanks a lot, everyone. So once you answered all those questions and added the weights and did all this background and the Excel did its magic, you finally end up with something that, Angela and Erin have just asked about, is that, how do we end up with the weights and scales? So for the first time you're seeing this and you're like, why is my coffee making yellow? And by the way, here is a little legend, and you can redistribute or add colors to your map, and you can add as many colors as you wish. There can be like 10 different ones if that's something that you prefer. So when you're looking at your coffee making in the group of processes morning routine, and you see it's 34, and you wonder why it's 34. The only thing I need to do in the morning is, get up and push that little button on my coffee machine. That certainly doesn't sound like 34. That's, a bigger one. That's the point when you go back and like, okay, so what do you think about cleanup? Is it really 18? And then you're looking at the difference and where exactly which answer made them score that much differently, right? So what is happening over there? And you reiterate and you try. And before you are happy with your small group of processes, you don't go and roll it out for the whole department or for the whole company. Because yes, once you've narrowed in on the right values and categories, you are with them for a long haul. Having said that, you still can review them. It's gonna be it's gonna be a bigger exercise, because then you would need to go back to those stakeholders who already answered and have their scores and have this conversation again. Why are we changing? What is happening? It's okay to do this, but not quite as often as you could do when you're just starting it out. Any question here, just for a second?
I'm not seeing questions, Olga. I think you've got everyone tracking still.
All right. So just to go through the main points, you identify the criteria. Let's go back here for a second. You identify the criteria to assess the process. You assign the weight for each criteria depending on the relative importance for the company or organizational objective. Then you brainstorm the values that speak the same language that the organization does. For example, for the process maturity, I put ad hoc, standardized, or optimized. Maybe you would use a different language here. Like reactive or proactive, you would use differentiators. Because what you want to do here, the last thing you want to do is to go with the new lingo and new things to learn for your customers. You better use something that you already use, something that's already part of your current culture, current organization. You don't use the word unsatisfactory. Don't use it. Don't start with it. Substitute it with something else that makes sense for you. And then once you brainstorm the values that do speak to your organization, you assign the drop-down list of values for each criteria and assign the weight for each value for each criterion. Here you see inside. Okay, having said that, what is happening next? And how do you make sure it works? So where to start the process improvement planning cycle? First, you catalog the processes. You want to make sure that you know what is happening. And you can start small. You can start with a little group or a bigger one, then expand, show the benefits of it, and then expand more, but start small, always start small. You catalog your processes and you assess each process on the scale. So once you've gone through this one, and we've just went through this exercise, right? When you are having the criteria and then you have the values and you have the weight assigned. So you have your little small list of processes that you assess each one of them on the scale. So you have the scores and the colors, and then you validate the assessments. You generate the heat map, we've just seen the heat map, and create the roadmap of opportunities, or process improvement roadmap, or just have it as a part of the prioritization conversation. So next time you're bringing it, you're like, I need more people and resources to work on this one. And here, that's how you present it. One add-on that might help you when you are building the heat maps, if there is something that requires additional attention because there might be a potential data breach or a compliance gap, you might want to add a little red flag or orange flag. What I tried initially is to put this into the score, to put it into the value if there is a gap. But what happens then, it doesn't give you an accurate picture of what happens in the process, because the process may very well be automated, well-defined, well-described, with plenty of documentation, and still have the data breach risk or compliance gap. So I would recommend just to put an additional note or additional flag if that's something that you want your organization to pay attention to. And why do you see an eternal cycle here? Because it's a process. It doesn't finish with just one cycle of doing this. You know, you through this, it took you 3 or 6 months to do this, and then you're done. No, it's a very much a life document and a live heat map. So things change. You can do this on a regular basis, or you can do this on a project basis, or sometimes you can use it just as an additional metric when you're launching some projects or some initiatives, rolling out a new program or implementing a new system. You can just do this. You can just go to your document, enter your process, and see the before score. And once you've gone through the whole improvement exercise, you can go back to the same document and see the after score. And just like that, out of not more than 10 minutes of time combined before and after, you will have a score. And which is more, this score means something not only to the specific process, but to all the processes, because they use the same scale. I have a couple of tips for successful implementation, and there are not many of them, but they're very important. And the first one is secure executive support. Why it's important? It's important and when it's important. It's important when you want to roll out for the whole organization or a broader audience, when you already have something to go on to. Because when you are doing only those very first steps, it's really, there should be someone who is backing you and accepting that there is value in this exercise, and that there is a value behind looking at the broader picture this way. It really helps. Try out small, test, reiterate. That's your reiteration exercise. When you're just taking a small group of processes, apply it to them, do the whole cycle, see whether it satisfies you and your customers, that small group that you've selected carefully for the first tryout. Not reiterate. Pretty much like in Eric Rice's book, The Lean Startup, right? You just start, read, launch the product, reiterate, do it again. Don't be afraid to start with something. Don't sit too long on it. Be consistent. It's a time-consuming exercise. So it's important to make sure that you are consistently spending some efforts and you're reminding people of importance of the work being done and its importance on an organization level. Like, it's very crucial for us to see the big picture. Be flexible in terms of when, where, and how your stakeholders are engaged with this. And sometimes that would mean that for one person, you have one approach, for another one, it's a different one. With some groups, you might need to sit longer and walk them through the exercise. Some of my groups like to do it on their own. So, you give them the idea and they're like, hey, I got it. I will send you the ready file, then we can talk through this one. Listen to your customers and follow their lead. As with any new thing that you are implementing, if there is a lot of familiarity, at least in the process around that, that helps a lot. And stay focused. Sometimes it takes time to get up to speed on this one. And through the first several iterations, it might be even frustrating, like the numbers don't come up, or I don't like the picture, or it doesn't really represent what I think it would. And leave it for an hour, for a day, for a week, go back to that, because it's a very helpful tool that might be useful not only in your work experience, but in other areas of life too. The last couple of words that I wanted to say is that it's a long run. So gear up, get ready, and most importantly, believe in what you do, and don't do it unless you believe that it brings value to your organization. If it doesn't, or you don't think it is, or you don't know how it could, please reach out to me. I'll show my details. We'll talk about it. Maybe it's not the right tool for you, but maybe you just don't know where and how it could be applied, and we can talk through this. And the last thing is that there is not a single tool that will change behavior. It's like you're paving the road, the nice road, and put flowers around it, but people would still use the shortcut because they're used to it. It's not even really that nice, and their shoes might get dirty, but you just walk through this. And what is the difference between them using the new pavement and going through the shortcuts? Is the conversation around it, like why it's happening, why are we doing this, why it's important. And I encourage you, whenever you have a broader conversation, you invite more people into your group conversation, and you see a couple of very shy people not saying a word, or someone that was really against it and voiced their opinion, talk to them separately. They might be your best critics, and that's very important. You'll just, ask them, what's wrong with it? How can we make it work? How can we make it work? If you were me, how would you make it work? And listen what they got to say. And similarly to those people who didn't voice their opinion, they might have some interesting points too. And that's about it. That concludes my conversation with you today. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. We can find time to chat if you need. And we have 10 minutes left. So there are two ways how we can spend those 10 minutes. One is that I see there is something open up in the chat. So if there have any questions, we can address the questions. And if we have any time left, I can show you the actual back-end document that I have created for this webinar, and I used to get those numbers and scores that you've seen and colors on the heat map. So please fire away.
So you're getting a lot of people thanking you for the level of detail, but I saw a question from Jessica. Can you clarify the scoring? Would you recommend this be done by each stakeholder individually or be done in a group? So not the weights, but the scoring.
Right. What I normally do is that I go to the head of the function and ask them to give me 2-3 subject matter experts for their function. There are always people who know their processes. As maybe they don't know the minutiae or the nitty-gritty of it, but they know the gist. And I would sit with those people and go through every question, explain every value, every criterion, and go through the specific answers. So this group will be already, first, you will get feedback from this firsthand. Next time, they can do it on their own. So those people who I worked with before and they know how it happens, we just keep doing that and they can do it on their own because they already know the game. And those people who are doing it for the very first time, absolutely, I would recommend doing it in group or individually. And for this reason, I would suggest, again, deal not with the whole function. So let's say you have a function of 50 people. You go back and you get 2, 3, 4, but not to the whole 50 people or 30 people. You talk to a manageable group of people with the same reasons. Get feedback, explain, and train. You're kind of grouping it all together.
Great answer there. And then you have a quote unquote wonky question from Erin. In Excel for colors, are you just using conditional formatting?
Yeah, I do.
That's what it looked like. And you've got people very interested in seeing the back-end document, so they'd love to see you do that.
Sure.
And I've got a question from Stephen. Have you ever considered quote unquote dynamic pricing? And by that he means if you've done a number of efforts that really were driven and respond to one factor, the other factors that haven't been making as big a difference need more weight. So that might take a little sinking in, or I'll send you the chat afterward if you want to respond to Stephen or have a conversation.
Stephen, let's have a conversation. I think I know what this is about. Let me take a stab at answering because I think that might be helpful for other people.
He gave an example. Example, employee experience is one factor, but the top 5 projects all were selected by other factors.
I would recommend going back to criteria and trying to make sure that you have all the right criteria in place. The reason is that if you are, I think that it will be something wrong with the criteria. The reason is when you're thinking about the criteria, you're thinking about something that's important for the whole group or for the whole organization. And one way or the other, they should touch upon those ones. Individual initiatives might address specific needs. So let's say we have a project only focused on improving customer experience. Then yes, customer experience will change from, let's say, unsatisfactory to good, but the rest will not. If you are not happy with how the number changes or whether the color changes, it's always going back to those criteria and weights. I would say that. That's like a broader answer. But if this is a specific answer, Stephen, I'm happy to please chat me up on LinkedIn and let's talk about it.
Well, you've got a few minutes here. I got one more question, but I don't know if you want to get to your tool before I give you one last question.
Unless it's a yes or no question, I think we better go to the tool.
Let's see. What level of understanding? What level of understanding do you look for in your audience when approaching this tool to get them set up? Is this setting the foundation for continuous improvement work, or might they need some understanding of direction and focus? Like, is this level of understanding?
Okay, level of understanding. It depends. The short answer is depends. It depends on the group I'm working with. If I'm working with a group of leaders, heads of functions, I show the importance of having a big picture, because quite often they have individual voices of people coming with their metrics and their ideas and their pains and their challenges, but often it's only like specific department related, and they are not comparable. To Stephen's point, right? The pain I come with is not the pain that someone else will come with. Similarly to, ER, you come, someone has a headache and someone has a scratch. Well, you don't come with a scratch, but just imagine that, right? And then similarly, you have people coming to the functions. And again, you might have an adult person coming with their persistent headache who would be quietly sitting there and just not saying anything, and a child wailing because they have a scratch on their arm. So a lot of leaders find themselves in kind of this situation where they just not hear the voices or hear the very loud voice, but it's hard to compare. So you bring it and it allows you to objectively compare it on the same scale. So this would be the message to the leaders. The message to the sub-functional leaders would be like, do you want to know what is happening in your function on a daily basis? And you already have so many people working for you. You don't know the very nitty-gritty of every process, but it's so helpful to know what is happening over there, and you have better control and better reporting on the process. It is not what's in the process, but on the process. And when I come to the individual contributors, I often start with, does everyone know how much pain you have in this process? Does everyone know how much effort it requires? Let's show. And we can show not only with words, we can show not only with frustration or some system numbers, we can use additional metric to this. And then I tailor my message to each and a specific group. I hope that answers.
That was great. Thank you.
And with 3 minutes to go.
We could do this. You can do this.
you can see it right on the screen.
If you want, you can enlarge it a little more to
it worked.
Increase the
yeah. I'll just show you how you play around with this one. So I have my coffee making routine here. They say the process, it's a coffee making, the process maturity is optimized in my level, but let's say it's ad hoc. I don't have a coffee machine, I have no idea if I have any coffee beans, and I don't have a grinder. So okay, let's put it ad hoc. Immediately the color has changed. Have you seen this one? Beautiful, right? It was a green 84 and now it's like yellow 61. The process documentation, nothing, it's non-existent. There must have been a coffee machine manual somewhere in the drawer, but I have no idea where it went. Maybe I even threw it away. So it's non-existent. Is it automated? Well, let's assume it's manual, and every single one is changing it. Customer experience, well, let's assume that, mine is excellent, but my customers are not happy with it, right? They don't like the taste of the coffee in my family. Things like this. And then, have test one, so you can type anything you want, and just let's say standardized. The documentation is comprehensive, immediately jumped from 15 to 35, and it's completely automated, still unsatisfactory for the customers, but at least good for me. This is how it works. You see some hidden hidden columns here. Those are the ones where I do have the value. There is the formula here for the final score, which of course can be amended. And for the formatting, as someone asked, yes, it's conditional formatting here, and then whatever way you want to present it. Calculator values are in a separate sheet. I normally hide them if I share it with anyone, just hide my Excel spreadsheet. So it's somewhere in the back end, but I kept it here for the demonstration purposes. That's about it.
Fantastic. Such a great, I will send you the chat because these are such lovely comments you're getting, but just appreciating the level of detail that you've given, your insights, your time, super helpful. Your recommendations for stakeholder engagement are totally resonating with me. Thank you. Such great detail you've included in this webinar. Amazing job, and thank you. And I will back all of that up, Olga. It's been lovely having you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the webinar. Hope to see you again. Bye.
Take care. Bye, everybody.